Okay, let's dive into something kind of wild. We're talking about Gen Z, the world's first true digital natives. They are, without a doubt, the most tech-savvy generation in history. But, and this is a big but, that fluency comes with a deep and honestly pretty unsettling paradox. So this is the big question, right? How can a generation that can navigate the digital world with their eyes closed also be so susceptible to getting things wrong? I think the answer is going to reveal something huge, a fundamental shift in how we as a society even decide what's true anymore. You have to remember, for this generation, there's no before the internet. Their entire reality has been shaped by smartphones, by social media, and that constant connection has completely rewired not just how they talk to each other, but what they believe. To really get it, we need to look at the evidence. All right, let's bring in our first piece of evidence. And it has to do with how Gen Z is totally tearing up the rulebook on one of society's oldest institutions, organized religion. Just look at these numbers. Some people are calling this the Great Unchurching. Only 11% of Gen Z go to religious services every week. That is half the rate of millennials, and a third of the rate of baby boomers. The pews are emptying out, and it is happening incredibly fast. And check this out. More than a third of Gen Z now say they have no formal religious affiliation. They're called the nuns. For a lot of them, it's not even about consciously leaving a faith. They were just never part of one to begin with. That's a huge break from the past. When we zoom out and just look at the data across generations, the pattern is, well, it's undeniable. On pretty much every single metric, whether it's affiliation or just how important religion is in their lives, Gen Z is leading this massive charge away from traditional institutions. And look, this isn't just apathy. This isn't kids being lazy. It is an active rejection, as this quote gets at. Many in Gen Z look at these institutions and see something that's totally out of step with their values on things like social justice and inclusivity. They feel like it doesn't represent them, so they're walking away. But here's where it gets really interesting. Leaving the church doesn't mean they're leaving faith behind. Not at all. A big majority, 65%, still call themselves spiritual. They're kind of unbundling religion, you know? They're taking the parts they like, meaning community, reflection, and building their own personalized, DIY spirituality. So, if that spiritual energy isn't going to church, where is it going? Well, belief doesn't just disappear, it flows into new channels. And that brings us to our second exhibit. So as organized religion is going down, something else is shooting way, way up. Esoteric beliefs. Take France, for example. A whopping 70% of young people there believe in stuff like astrology. This isn't some fringe thing anymore. It's a mainstream cultural force. You know, it helps to think of this as a marketplace of belief. And in that market, pseudoscience is just a better product for Gen Z. It's like organized religion is the old, clunky legacy software, while astrology and tarot are the sleek, new apps. They're personal, flexible, low commitment, and most importantly, they put you in charge. And you can totally see the appeal, right? In a world that feels so chaotic and anxious and just out of control, these practices offer a sense of order. They give you a framework to make sense of your life, turning what feels like random noise into a meaningful cosmic plan. Okay, now for our final piece of evidence. And I gotta tell you, this is where a deep, deep distrust of the establishment goes to its most logical and, frankly, its most startling extreme. Brace yourself. Get ready for this. A full one-third of young adults are not firmly convinced that the Earth is round. Let that sink in. This isn't just healthy skepticism anymore. This signals a profound breakdown of trust in our most basic established scientific facts. And that doubt, it's hardening into actual, active belief. 1 in 8 young people now say they believe the Earth is flat. So the question is no longer just what. The question is why. Because here's the secret. This has almost nothing to do with science. It is not an intellectual failure. It's a social act. It is a performance. Believing the Earth is flat is the ultimate way to plant a flag and say, I reject everything you're telling me. It's about declaring your allegiance to a tribe that defines itself by that very rejection. And of course, social media provides the perfect machine for this. You know how it works. An algorithm on a platform like YouTube serves you one video, then another and another. It creates this automated funnel that can lead curious people right down a rabbit hole into these echo chambers. where what you believe is reinforced 24/7 by the community, not by facts. Okay, so we've seen the flight from religion, the boom in astrology, and even the rise of flat earth theory. What on earth connects all this? Well, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It all comes down to a complete rewiring of the rules of truth itself. This whole thing rests on two giant pillars. First, a catastrophic collapse of trust in pretty much every traditional institution. Government, media, science, you name it. And second, the invisible hand of what you might call the algorithmic shepherd. Social media feeds that guide us into our own little personalized realities, designed to keep us engaged, not to keep us informed. And this leads us to the master key that unlocks this entire paradox. It's a new model for belief called the truth stack, and it's basically a completely inverted hierarchy for how this generation decides what's real and what isn't. So here's how this new world order works. Traditionally, truth was built on a foundation of experts and evidence. Now, it's flipped upside down. It starts with a foundation of total distrust. On top of that, information is fed to you by algorithms. Then you filter it through what feels authentic to you. And finally, at the very top, a belief is locked in by the consensus of your online tribe. And this one model, it explains everything. From embracing astrology to doubting around Earth, the underlying logic is exactly the same. It's just being applied inside different online communities, with each one negotiating its own private version of reality. And that leaves us with a really critical and maybe pretty scary question for all of us. When truth becomes a personalized, curated experience for everyone, what common ground do we have left? The shared reality that we need for everything, from public health to a functioning democracy, it just starts to dissolve. So what happens when we no longer live in the same world?